Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting for November 5th, 2018. We have a quorum. Thank everyone for being here today. And I'm sure those that aren't here just haven't set their clocks back. First item of business is to approve the minutes for the September 10th meeting. We did not meet in October, so our last meeting was September 10th, 2018.
Move to approve minutes.
It's been moved. It's been seconded. Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. Number 3, items for discussion, action. First, street resurfacing projects. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'll do the update on the street resurfacing projects, kind of overview some of the stuff, which we went to the project status map instead of the detailed list of all the projects, and so I'll kind of run down some things. You know, we go back over all the things that we've approved, and we've approved 6 residential projects. Three of those we have started construction. I guess on the map, you know, it shows only one. One's actually in construction. The other 2, last week we did pre-works, and so this week we'll start construction on those. So the first 3 residential projects that we've approved, we've got those starting in construction this week. And then if we go through the arterial projects, you know, we actually have 84 arterial projects that we've approved. We first had the 16 early start projects, and then in May we went with another 41, and then this last September we did another 27. And so out of those 84 projects, we actually have 60 of those projects either, you know, POs written and kind of assigned to contractors and or in construction and complete. We actually have 12 projects completed, you know, as of today. So that's a real good start for us. Then I'll kind of go through some of the completed projects. I'll go for 6 of the 12 completed projects. Portland Avenue from Southwest 44th to Southwest 29th. That was one of the first projects that we were able to complete. And this one was our typical mill and overlay project. We first go in and we do any of the patching areas that are in really rough shape and we think the base needs to be addressed, and so we'll go in there and we'll do full depth patching, and then we come back and we mill that road and we overlay it. Of course, in all of these, you know, the initial start of any of that stuff is the full depth patching, and we try to do all the concrete repairs initially if we possibly can. We go through and we do all the curb and gutter repairs, any inlets, you know, storm drain inlets that have some issues or stuff, and a lot of those grates aren't bicycle-friendly grates, and so we put in those bicycle-friendly grates and address all those issues. And other things that you don't see, we always, you know, when there's facilities there, we always upgrade the ADA, the handicap ramps. We'll start with the ramps, and then we go with, we upgrade the push buttons, you know, the pedestrian push buttons, and now they have the audio that you can hear when you push the button. And then we go with the actual pedestrian signal itself. We upgrade that to make sure it's current with the updated codes and everything like that. And then on all the streets that we're doing, you know, we're upgrading our traffic detection. You know, we're going to a radar. The old loops and stuff can be affected with mill and overlay and any kind of construction like that, so we go with the radar. It's a more advanced, improved technology, and so we do that at all the intersections that we can, and so that gets us a good update on all of that stuff. And that was one of the first ones we finished. Another project that we finished was Northeast 122nd and Air Depot to Midwest Boulevard. This was one of our rural roads, and a lot of the rural roads, they're in conditions that we have to go in and do a full reconstruction. And I think I went over a lot of this that last time, but a lot of the things that we try to do on these is if the material's pretty thin that's there and it's in bad enough shape, we'll incorporate that existing pavement into the base. We'll reclaim that into it, and then we come in with different materials and we stabilize that to make that base really hard, and then we come in with our overlay, and of course we always finish it up with striping. Which brings us to Northwest 50th May to Penn. It's another project that was more of, our urban streets. It was a mill and overlay. This was a challenging project. We never know exactly, well, we always send out cores to figure out what is, what the depth of the road and what that typical section is. This particular road was a street that had been overlaid. It was a concrete street that had been overlaid in the past with asphalt. And so a lot of times those are a little more challenging, because once you mill that asphalt off, you try to get down to that concrete and you see what condition it's in. And that's kind of when we start our patching, our full depth patching. A lot of those areas kind of show themselves before, but then a lot of times once you get that milled up and you get that exposed concrete, you see what issues you have, you address those issues, make those full depth patches where need be, and then you get your overlay going. And the same thing, that one we had some concrete curb and gutter. We have a school zone that goes through the middle of that project. We did all the proper striping and the ADA ramps to make sure we can get people safely across there to that school. And of course we upgraded all the pedestrian facility stuff with the new traffic detection on that radar. Wilshire, Spencer Jones to the city limits there. This is another project that was a full reconstruct. And so same thing, we reclaim, we incorporate that existing asphalt into the base, we stabilize that material, and then we come back in with the asphalt and get some fresh striping on it. So nice to see these pictures. It always looks nice when it's fresh asphalt and new paint on there. Pennsylvania Avenue, northwest 122nd to a Memorial. This was our standard mill and overlay. A lot of the improvements in this were ADA compliance issues. Right there at 133rd and Penn, you have a bunch of commercial areas in there, I think Walmart there and stuff, and so we updated the ADA ramps and all the traffic detection, all the pedestrian push buttons and the pedestrian signals in that area. That was a good project. One of the good things about that project, it ties into Memorial, and Memorial is a project, it's a ODOT City shared project that's going on currently, so we were able to get in there and finish that project, and then right behind them we'll have a shared project that's going to finish that stuff up. And so a lot of connectivity there, and it just shows a lot of progress in certain areas going on. Northeast 178th, Indian Meridian to XXX. This was another full reconstruction project where we go in there and we incorporate that base in there and stabilize that material and then come in with asphalt on that. So those are the projects, 6 of the 12 projects that have been completed, and I'll kind of jump into some projects that are currently in construction. I wanted to start with Southwest 29th, Western to Penn. If you recall, this is a 2-mile stretch on Southwest 29th. It goes from Penn to Western and Western to Shields. This project is substantially complete. The only thing we're really waiting on is to finish up some of the striping. This was a challenging project because remember when I talked about the different typical sections, this one had a bunch of different typical sections. You have a lot of concrete, full concrete streets. You have some concrete streets that had been overlaid with asphalt, and then some just full asphalt and stuff like that. A lot of these roads, when they first have a 2-lane, they come in and they leave a lot of that stuff that's there, and then when they widen that to a 4-lane, they leave the 2 lanes that are different, and sometimes those 2 center lanes will be different than the 2 outside lanes. And so we try to catch that in all of the pre-construction information that we try to gather. We try to pothole that and figure that stuff out. So we kind of know what we're dealing with before we get in there. But once we expose a lot of that stuff, we figure out where the patches and stuff are needed in those areas. This particular project has a lot of drainage and stuff on it, so there's a lot of inlet repairs, curb and gutter, make sure there's no standing water. We also had a cross drain that had issues, and so that kind of slowed a little bit of stuff down, but we got all those things addressed, and so it's nice to see that project progress in the way it is, and currently it's been repaved and restriped, and so hopefully we'll get to add that to the completed list, those 2 miles. Martin Luther King, Northeast 23rd to Northeast 36. It's our standard mill and overlay. The picture here shows some concrete repairs. We do have a lot of concrete intersections, in different miles, and this one here at 36, you can see that there was a lot of issues with that concrete, and so they've gone in there and they've torn all that out, and they're replacing all that stuff. This particular project is a good one also, too, because at Northeast 23rd and Kelly, if you recall, this is one of our street enhancement projects that was approved, and so it'll go from it crosses through MLK all the way down to the Katy Trail on 23rd. So that's a nice tie-in, to get this resurfaced and everything, and tie in to one of our street enhancement projects. And then Northwest 63rd, Northeast 63rd, Santa Fe to Kelly. This is, we had a lot of patching on those, and so we did a lot of patching, and it's your typical mill and overlay. You can see on the left side of that picture, the milled surface and everything. So, and then on the right side, they're repaving everything. So hopefully that one will be complete pretty quick too. It looks like they're progressing on that one. Northeast 63rd, Midwest Boulevard to Douglas Boulevard. This was not a mill and overlay. This was more of an overlay project. If we have a good, if the asphalt looks good and it seems to be holding up and structurally sound, if we have the potential where there's no curb and gutter and we can add structure to that, we always just try our best to overlay that. There was some curb and gutter around the bridge there, so we did a little bit of edge mill to tie that in, but anytime we can have the opportunity to add structure to that gets us closer to our, city standard typical section for arterial streets. And here's one of the neighborhoods going on. We obviously saw a pretty bad area on this one. This particular project, the same thing. We'll try not to do any milling. We'll just try to add structure to it. There are some areas of this neighborhood that are in a little better condition than that, and so we'll overlay that part. But in areas like this where it's just gone too far, we'll do more of the full reconstruction like I talked about. We'll incorporate that asphalt into the base. We'll stabilize that material, and we'll come back in with an overlay and tie all that structure together. And here's another, Anderson, Hiawassee, I-240, Southeast 74, another residential resurfacing project that we have. This one has a lot of transverse cracking, and, on those transverse crack, we try to go in there and crack seal a lot of that stuff and make sure that there's no voids, get that cleaned out. And so in those areas where we can just overlay that, that'll be kind of our start of the patching process and transverse crack repair. And we'll repair all those things, and then we'll overlay that. This neighborhood also has a few areas that'll probably be full reconstruct, but they've started, and hopefully we'll progress on. That kind of ends that. If y'all have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
I have a couple of questions. So basically, either a full reconstruction is done or mill and overlay. What would be the longevity of life of each one of those?
A full reconstruct, hopefully we can get, 20 plus years out of that expectancy. Your typical mill and overlay, it can go on for, anywhere from 10 to 15 years that it should go, and we have a lot of areas that we have done mill and overlays, and it's 20 years later, and they're withstanding in real good condition. As long as we can get that sealed off, the idea, as long as we can keep the moisture out of the base, and usually that's what the mill and overlay does. It's structurally sound material, but weather comes in, and that the oil oxidizes a little bit, and you'll get a little bit of cracking, and that kind of opens it up and let moisture in. If we can get to that and do that mill and overlay, we can get that sealed back off, and it's structurally sound, so you don't have any potholes or anything like that. It will extend the life for a long time. As long as we don't get that weather cracking again, it can extend it for 10 plus years.
Why is concrete not being used on the mill and overlay? Asphalt is being used, even if it's on top of existing concrete, correct?
In the concrete area, some of those pictures, if it's a concrete area and we can go in there and repair those concrete panels, then we will always try our best to repair those concrete panels and keep the concrete if we can. A lot of times concrete, you know, and I don't think we've ran into too many of these in the projects that we've picked, but if concrete's, you know, beyond repair, we look at the budget and we will evaluate that, and if it's a, you know, 40, 50%, you know, replacement of those concrete panels, sometimes it's best to replace the ones that are in real bad shape and overlay that with asphalt, but I don't think we had any of those. Most of the time, we will try to keep, if it's concrete, we try to keep that concrete. If it's asphalt, we try to keep that asphalt. In the areas that it's already been overlaid, we go ahead and try to go back with that, because usually when they change the elevation, you know, all the drainage was adjusted to meet that, and so we really need to go back and maintain those lines and grades to make sure all the drainage is proper and stays correct in those areas. You're welcome. I'll turn this over to Mr. Winger.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
You said that you used a material on those transverse cracking. What kind of material is that?
It's a rubberized asphalt. It goes in at a much higher temp than the asphalt is laid, and so it, you know, where there's and I'll go into a lot of this on the Burt Cooper Trail, but I'll go ahead and get into it a little bit here. But you know, where it's a real, you know, a 1/4 of an inch crack, we go in and we put that rubberized asphalt material down. It goes in at about 400 degrees. And so what happens is it really seals that off, make sure that there's no moisture going to get in there, and then when we overlay that, you don't see that reflective cracking come back up through as long as we've done that. And so in areas where you have a crack that's greater than that, where there's maybe a, you know, an inch to 2 inch crack, we'll go ahead and tear that out. We'll try to get 1 foot, 2 foot out of that, and we'll do a full depth repair on that, get asphalt back up to that level, and a lot of times we'll put a fabric, a geofabric membrane over top of that. It's kind of a thick fabric, and it will also kind of help, you know, keep that reflective cracking from coming back through when we overlay that surface.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next item is discussion on revived arterial street resurfacing prioritization method.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning we've got a couple of items not for action but for consideration and discussion. I'd like to receive some comments. We'd like to bring these back to you for approval. But going back to the implementation plan that was approved earlier this year, one of the first things we did was created a prioritization method. Item 3A2 is for arterial, and 3A3 is for residential, and I'm going to discuss them actually together as opposed to two separate items. You should have received a couple of handouts. They should be in front of you now, and so I'm going to speak to those. So what has changed, and why are we back to you today with some modifications? We in Public Works have been working this summer, and we'd hoped to have it already in place on some new software that helps us manage pavements better than just our standard GIS, standard information systems. We have the ability to combine that information, but with some advanced software that we now have, it'll actually do some projections. It'll help us do some cost analysis. It allows us also to be more refined in some of the lists that we would bring back to you in the future. As we've gotten into this software, we're finding that it doesn't receive the information the same way we have been utilizing it, and so we need to make some minor adjustments, and so let me discuss those now. If you look at the arterial resurfacing revised sheet, it says draft at the top. It's not yet approved. It has a couple of changes. The previous one, the previous sheet, and if you look at the top left portion of this slide, it had 4 criteria: PCI, ADT, maintenance cost, and accident severity. What we're proposing is a new methodology that uses PCI, ADT, and maintenance cost, with the reason being that the software does not incorporate accident severity as one of its measures. We don't think that the list will dramatically change if we move to this. You'll see that we've slightly adjusted the percentages, so the percentage that we previously apportioned to accident severity, we've basically increased the ADT and the maintenance by 5 percentage points, so we won't see a difference in true weight, but it is going to allow us to use the software. To kind of explain how that software works, if you look at the bottom and the way that our methodology is going to work, we will be using PCI, traffic count, and maintenance cost. And we'll actually have that raw data. That is coming straight out of our city systems, as we've discussed in the past. We annually update our PCIs, our traffic counts are updated regularly, and maintenance cost is something that comes right out of our work order system. With that, we're able to take those and rank them based on all streets in the system. So when you look at that second column at the bottom of your page, that's the gray color, you're going to see that that then produces what rank that street is compared to all other streets by that particular category. Using then the weighted measures, 40%, 30%, or 30%, we're able to calculate a weighted rank. The first green column then is the summed total of that weighted rank, and then we're able to actually publish a final rank. So this is where we get back to top priority versus least priority as we go through that calculation. Again, this is very similar to the methodology we're using in the past. The biggest change is that we're no longer going to be using accident severity because part of the methodology and the software just don't have that feature for us to incorporate as we move forward. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the residential, and then we can maybe answer questions on both. Now, on the residential, we did have 3 measures, PCI, but then we had 2 measures for maintenance. We had maintenance history and maintenance cost. So one was frequency of work order, and one was the actual cost of work orders at 50%, 25%, and 25%. Now, on the residential, we're looking to make a change. We're going to keep PCI. We're going to keep the maintenance cost, but we have a feature in the software and through our calculations where we can actually take number of addresses, which is really a density reading. So again, as we have maybe neighborhoods that have similar PCIs and neighborhoods that have similar maintenance costs, the neighborhoods that are more dense, i.e. the ones that have possibly higher traffic, we do not measure traffic volumes of residential streets. This might be our way of getting back to measuring the higher use streets for that measure. You'll see that the percentages have not changed, but the way the methodology works is the same. We can take those PCIs, number of addresses, and maintenance cost, rank them, weight them. We then sum those totals and create that new rank system. This is going to allow us to present future lists to you as an advisory board for recommendation for additional sales tax dollars moving forward. There's a few other things that we're able to do with the GIS that we mentioned, and one of the biggest changes in the residential is we're going to be looking at quarter section or quarter mile. We had previously brought to use square miles, so all the future lists that we have are going to be very much more neighborhood centered. So it doesn't necessarily mean that all neighborhoods in a mile need to be resurfaced. We can focus down a little bit finer. And so with that, I'd like to open up for question if there's some questions about the proposed changes. What we would do next is, if there are no changes, we would put this on for a future meeting to go ahead and adopt the revised prioritization, and we would then start presenting future lists using this methodology.
Any questions? Eric, I have a question. So the main difference is taking out the accident situation on the arterial.
From the arterial, yeah.
Is there a concern about that? Is there any way to put that back into a program situation? Because obviously we felt it originally was important to use that as a barometer.
So if I go back to that slide, I think one of the things that I think what moving forward with the accident severity only being 10% of the total weight and most of the weight being in the pavement condition and the traffic, we feel pretty confident that the overall list really isn't going to change in priority. One of the things I think we mentioned with Mr. Dixon, and one of the things that we were talking about is our old scoring system, though. We probably had 2 pages of project list scores that were 4.7, right? We couldn't tell the difference between 2 pages worth of 4.7 scored streets. The new weighted rank, in addition to the change that we're talking about with the software, if you look at that next to last column, the light green column on your form, you're going to see that we actually get a more fine creation of the rank. We're going to be able to come to you with better justification that these are the actual ranks, first, second, third, and fourth. We can get to a decimal point with the new weighted system. So, but with that said, I don't think we're going to see an actual impact in the way that the streets are listed. Now, all those that say had that same 4.7 score, we may see some change inside those with the new system, prioritizing the ones that, again, with the new system, create that finer score. But again, they're all going to fall near that top of that list still. They're not going to fall to the bottom of the list with the change. I think the other thing that we're going to be able to do with the arterials, previously we were looking at bond streets, specifically bond recommendations that came out of the bond program. The next list that will be coming to you, it will look at all streets in the entire city network. So no longer will it be just those bond streets. We're actually, with this new software and some of the methodologies, we're going to look at every street in the system regularly. So there may be some streets that weren't reported previously as being poor that through this new system are going to probably elevate themselves into the list. Just because we didn't get a call doesn't mean it shouldn't be considered or done. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of impact, and I think with the adoption, one of the things we can do is show you what that new list looks like. So before the board considers recommending an item for the council to approve, you'll actually be able to see that list, and if it would be helpful, we could show you what the old list was and the new list, and you can make that comparison. So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Eric.
Very welcome. So we will be bringing this back to you at the next meeting for your consideration. If you do have any other questions before then, please let us know.
Next item is 3B, Street Enhancement Projects, Status Update.
Good morning. Aubrey McDermott, Planning Director. I'm going to introduce you to something that I think you will be seeing for the next several months as we start progressing towards our construction of our street enhancement projects. I wanted to give you a little bit of a background as to how the process works and take you step by step, and then we're going to be putting kind of a progress chart indicator at the bottom of each slide that you'll start to recognize as you see us report out. So the process being that once we get approval of a project and it goes through City Council and is authorized for approval, this is the process that we start. We begin a scoping process. The streetscape enhancements, as we talked about before, are going to be some of the more complicated projects, longer-term projects, because the scoping portion of this is going to have a lot more pieces to it and involve stakeholder and community input. So as part of the scoping process, we do some preliminary scoping. We, of course, have had stakeholder input on a lot of these districts that have generated the street enhancement projects, so those groups have been meeting and discussing what their needs are to date. So that information is then taken into a preliminary scope that is used to help us advertise for a consultant to match the types of functions that consultant would be designing to. Through the advertisement process with the RFP, then a short list of consultants is brought in to do interviews, which we've promised that anybody on the board who wants to be involved in these streetscape enhancement projects, perhaps it's ones in your ward, might be able to sit on the interview panel and participate in these stakeholder meetings throughout the process. Then the consultant is selected, and that's when we start to negotiate the terms of the contract. And once the contract is awarded, then we go into the design phase. So you can also see that there's room for stakeholder input. The consultants typically would want to have some sort of a meeting to kick the process off, meet all the different stakeholders that are involved, reconfirm what the priorities are of the project and what the elements are for each streetscape project. Then they generate a preliminary report, and that preliminary report is covering all of the different aspects and design solutions that have been worked out in detail with the stakeholders' input. That preliminary report is then taken to this board for approval to move forward to the next process. And you'll notice on this list that some things are italicized, and what that means is that some projects may require us to do some sort of right-of-way acquisition, surveying, or utility location. This is typically the case in street enhancement projects because they're dealing with the entire street, possibly moving curbs. Other projects that you'll see the same progress list, like trails or bicycle facilities, probably won't have to go through these extra steps. Of course, again, after the preliminary report and the consultant finalizes the plans, they would bring that set of plans back for another round of stakeholder input and then forward to the board to approve and go forward in the process to start to issue an advertisement to bid. So after final plans and specs, we get into the process of getting a contractor on board to build the project. So the construction project starts, and then you will begin to see construction updates, just like Eric gave on the street resurfacing projects. So this is kind of the whole process. We will keep you updated throughout the process, and hopefully you will be involved throughout the process so that when we come back and start to show details about how different streetscape projects are done, you'll be able to participate down into the level of detail that you wish. The other alternative is for smaller types of projects. The city has an on-call design or unit price contract already established with certain vendors. So if these are smaller projects like a sidewalk segment, maybe a trail or a bike facility, which just includes maybe some striping, you can bypass a lot of those really extensive bidding RFP processes because these are already pre-qualified consultants. So this in-house team of people in Public Works Department can either help with the engineering and design, or the on-call consultants can do that piece of it, and you're able to issue those work orders and get started on construction and potentially have a faster front end to doing some of those smaller scale projects. So 2 different paths. And you'll start to see on all the projects that we're reporting this type of timeline right here, and we'll show you where it's at in the process. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see certain projects are in the interview stage for consultants, and as we report out, we'll give you more information about that stage. The other thing that I wanted to start introducing to you at this point in time is all the different staff members that are going to be included in working on these projects. We have lots of staff beyond just those that are listed here that work on the street enhancement projects. This is a few of our key team members that I want you to be able to meet. Public Works and the Planning Department each have project managers that serve different roles throughout the process. For street enhancement updates, this time I wanted to introduce you to the Planning Department's overall project manager for the street enhancements. Each project, street enhancement project, has another staff person that's been working with the community that's been assigned to report and work on those projects specifically. But the next presentations are going to go into each one of the street enhancements and update you on where we've been to date. And I'm going to have Lakeisha Dunbar, who is our transportation planner in the Planning Department, take you through that. And as she walks you through, she will introduce you to the other staff members that have been involved on those projects. So any questions before I hand it over to Lakeisha? Okay, thanks.
Good morning. Again, my name is Lakeisha Dunbar, and I will be taking you through the status update for the street enhancement projects. I want to remind you of the projects that have been approved thus far. The 8 that you see here are the ones that have been selected with the first half of the street enhancement fundings. The Walker Avenue project was added on, I believe, at the last meeting. I'm going to start with the Paseo area. It is bounded by Northwest 30th Street on the north side, Northwest 23rd Street on the south, and Chartel on the west, and Harvey on the east. That's a pretty broad area. A lot of the focus, though, is going to be pretty much along Paseo Street, Walker area, and there'll be some focus also along Dewey and Northwest 28th, at the intersection of Northwest 28th and Paseo. This project has a $4 million budget. And the status of this project, we have includes quite a bit of meeting with stakeholders. This project is coordinated by Kim Cooper Hart. She is the project coordinator, and she and other staff has spent quite a bit of time meeting with stakeholders, kind of getting a preliminary idea of the scope of what the main needs are. Some of those primary goals include upgrades of crosswalk access, improved walkability, stormwater management. And the key thing here in this area is that we want to maintain the character. So it will be quite hard, some challenges there in maintaining the character, but also upgrading walkability, accessibility for sidewalks, and including the stormwater management. Another challenge in this area will include coordination, given that there's the Friday events in the area and the annual festival. So there will be quite a bit of time taken here continued through the scoping phase to make sure that that is coordinated efficiently. This project has been advertised, and so the next stage of this project will be go through the interview process for the consultants. The next project is Northwest 10th and Vermont. This one is pretty much an intersection improvement project. The goals here include really trying to get access across 10th Street for the residences. I'm going to go back here for a second. On the south side, there are apartment complexes, and on the north side, there's retail with Lavandaria Latina shopping mart and the Quick Stop. And so the goal here is to get residences across 10th Street. 10th Street is a principal arterial, 4 lanes of traffic, and there are also bus stops, bus shelters on both sides of the street. Sidewalks have been added on the north side, and another goal here is to connect sidewalks on the south side. The budget for this project is over $730,000. Northeast 23rd Street is the next project. The boundary of this project extends from Kelly to Miramar. Brock mentioned this project earlier. It's about a 1.5-mile corridor, 4-lane principal arterial with a budget of $1 million. Some of the primary goals here are to upgrade the crosswalk access and improve walkability. And there's also potential for connectivity to the Katy Trail that is near the Miramar intersection area. One keynote here is that we plan to begin stakeholder involvement after tomorrow's election. We wanted to make sure that the new council member is involved in the stakeholder process. And so this one is still at the preliminary scope phase and has, and it may not be advertised. It's one of those ones that we are trying to identify some low-hanging fruit. 10th and Vermont is also one of those projects that may be one of those ones that won't have to go through the full design phase. It may skip some of those key elements that Aubrey mentioned earlier and could kind of go either be an on-call contract or some of the design could be done in-house. Plaza area, the extent of this project is basically between Kentucky and Blackwelder Avenue. It's about a 1/4-mile corridor on a major collector. Here, the goals are really to improve accessibility, upgrade crosswalks in this area. This is also another area where extensive communication with some of the stakeholders has already taken place, and we may not need a lot of stakeholder involvement going forward, at least one meeting during the design process. It too is still in the preliminary scope phase. It has not been advertised for design, and it may be also considered one of those low-hanging fruits projects where we could possibly get done in-house, and it may not take as long to construct. Portland Avenue is the next project. The limits on this project are from Northwest 36th Street in the north side down to Northwest 23rd Street. It's approximately a mile-long corridor on a 4-lane principal arterial. It has a $3.9 million budget. And one of the key elements here for the primary goals is to look at doing signalization at Portland somewhere near 31st intersection, which is right across the street from the park in that area. There are residences on the west side, and they have expressed a desire to get better connectivity to be able to cross over to the park, the Will Rogers Park on the east side. This project has been advertised, and the next phase for this project will be looking at also interviews for hiring a consultant. The next project is the Northwest 39th Street area. It is bounded on the north side by the I-44 highway, on the south side, Northwest 39th Street, and to the east, Penn, and to the west, Youngs Boulevard. This project mainly is looking at safety and improving walkability and accessibility, improving lighting in this area. Multiple meetings have been held with stakeholders and city staff in this area. It too has been advertised and will be put out for interviews very soon. The next project is the Stockyards area project. This one is bounded on the north side by the Oklahoma River, on the south side down to Southwest 15th Street. A lot of the focus on this project will be along Agnew and Exchange, pretty much looking at the intersection of Agnew and Exchange. The project has a budget of $3.5 million, and the stakeholders in this area have expressed a desire for some traffic calming. And there has been quite a bit of involvement, stakeholder involvement with this area, also with city staff and the business owners and property owners there. This project too has been advertised and will be in the same group of projects that will go before for interviews. And the last project is Walker Avenue. The limits of Walker Avenue is from Northwest 36th Street down to Northwest 23rd Street. It's close to a mile long, and it is a minor arterial, 2 lanes. The budget for this project is $3 million. And some of the primary goals for this project are, again, to improve walkability, accessibility. There's a large stormwater component, management component for this project also. One key thing with this project is it does connect the Paseo area down to the Uptown area, quite a few residences along the corridor. And because the project does run through the Paseo area, it parallels with it, we do desire a heavy coordination between the Paseo project and this project. This project has not been advertised yet, so we're hoping to get it moved along and for them to at least run simultaneously. Some key things there is to minimize impacts on the businesses in the area and the property owners, and maximize the funding between the two projects so that there's not a lot of overlap for the design. That is the last project on the list. Again, this one's in the preliminary scope phase. And this one, too, in the future, we plan to hold at least 2 meetings for this one to kind of break up the limits of this project, because they're very distinct areas between the 2 projects as you go down the corridor. Some reminders for the overall process. Aubrey showed you the process, but just want to kind of give you a frame of mind of the length of time that it could take. It could take anywhere from up to over 24 months just to get us to the construction phase. So just kind of keep that in mind. I know, again, we're trying to look for some low-hanging fruit to get out there on the ground to show that we are utilizing the funds that have been allocated for these projects. But then we're going to add on to that design phase somewhere between a minimum of 9 to 12 months, and it could be more, particularly for, some of the projects where we have to do a lot more coordination due to constraints of timing or the proximity of the different properties. So this could be a 3 to 5 year process to get some of these projects on the ground. So we just kind of want to set that in mind. Again, some of the next steps, there are 4 of the projects that I identified that are still in the preliminary scope phase. And so those still are being determined as to whether or not we're going to go out to advertise or if they will be done in-house or as an on-call contract. And then the ones that have been advertised, those then will, the next process for those is that we will be coordinating interviews to hire consultants to do the designs for those projects. That is all that I have at this time, if they have any questions.
I have a question. So you're thinking from this point forward, before these are completed, you're looking 3 to 5 years?
Yes.
So our program of the sales tax extension is 27 months. So do we take funds during that period of time earmarked for these 8 projects?
So I think that's a great question, Mr. Chairman. So as we continue to collect funds, I think one of the things that we find with the streetscapes, and I think what was presented, is we're going to have a range of streetscapes. Some are going to take a lot less time, but some of the ones that are more complicated and have a lot of stakeholder input could take more time. When we are done collecting the funds are still going to remain here with the Better Streets Advisory Board for recommendation to the City Council. So it is very likely that we're going to have collected all the funds, yet we will still be having meetings, and there could be designs and there could be construction still ongoing. We will not probably finish, I should say that, we won't finish all the construction by the time we collect the last of the pennies, okay? Typical, just like what you're seeing on the MAPS 3 program, the funds were collected some time ago, but construction is proceeding and it's working towards a completion. You can expect the same in this sales tax program as well. We will collect all the funds, and it could be another year or 2 before we are able to wrap it all up. But I will emphasize, I think we want to emphasize on even the streetscapes, we're going to look for some of those opportunities that we maybe can get some of those early low-hanging fruit type projects, the ones that are more simplified, the ones that still need stakeholder input but maybe not as aggressive a design. Hopefully we can get some of those into construction maybe as early as next year.
I actually have a question for Aubrey, I think. Could be a sidebar issue, but I'm going to ask it now. My overlap with this committee is the Mayor's Committee on Disability Concerns. And that group has grown a great deal. And around the table, we really have, if you will, one from column A and one from column B. In reality, we have so many people represented in the disabled community. And the part, everyone knows what a 5-foot turning radius is on plans, and historically we've set in on different groups throughout the committee, all the public groups, and I was wondering if it would be a possibility that of those members we might actually have a member that could look or be part of some of these design, at least through the read-throughs. The thing that we so often overlook is the visually impaired and the hearing impaired. We're really quite aware of what it takes to get a wheelchair anywhere. But sometimes those things, I've been known to get up and make comments in downtown design and urban design that weren't really considered. And so I think maybe it would be, if it's a possibility, we're getting ready to restructure and do a lot of different things that we've not done before. It seems to me like this might be a good overlap and really a way to incorporate things, and the mayor's all about the inclusivity. I think maybe if we could do that, I would sure be in favor of asking them if they would be interested.
That's great. As Eric mentioned, when the city does the resurfacing projects on streets, they try to upgrade all the ADA requirements and facilities. The street enhancement projects absolutely have the ability to look at ways to make those streets safer for everybody, all different needs. So I think that would automatically fit into the process when we start to invite people to come provide input on the initial scoping and the review of the preliminary plans and the final plans and specs. We absolutely could reach out to someone and have a member of that committee join that group. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments? Oh, I had another thought. The traffic calming, can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Can you repeat the question, please?
You were talking on some of these projects about traffic calming.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
Elaborate on what traffic calming is, or
Yes,
what
ma'am.
could be included
Yes,
in
ma'am.
traffic calming? Okay. In this area, let's see, this particular project here is the Walker project. I know that it does extend down to the Northwest 23rd area where there's quite a heavy traffic, very heavy retail area, and so some things that could be included. For example, Mr. Johnson explained here, mentioned changing the turning radius. Sometimes that can slow down traffic. Changing some of the elements along a corridor that can help either slow down traffic, make it more visible for pedestrians. Sometimes some elements could include on-street parking or changing of on-street parking, chicanes. There are different elements that could be included. And so that's where we would look to the consultants to help us identify what would be the best alternatives to implement in some of these areas. So Walker is one. I believe the Plaza District might be another one, another area, particularly where there's high pedestrian crossings and access. Anything else? Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is item 3C, sidewalk projects, status update. John?
Good morning. I'm John Tankard with the Planning Department. I'm going to go through the sidewalks and then the bicycles, and then we're going to get into trails. There's quite a bit of overlap with the procedures that Aubrey laid out and some of the topics that were discussed during the street enhancements. So first, I just wanted to kind of remind that the criteria that was agreed upon by the committee and the project lists all kind of stem from the adopted bicycle and pedestrian master plan, Bike Walk OKC. And within each of these different project types, those project lists are being looked at thoroughly right now with our different project teams. So each of the three project types have different project teams. First group is our sidewalk project team. So this is a collaboration between the Public Works Department, the MAPS Department, Planning, and we're working with an outside consultant, CEC Corporation, and our representative on that from that group is Kyle Morse, professional engineer. And I wanted to just go briefly recap the projects that have been approved. We approved about half of the funds of the $24 million. And those are broken into 5 different categories that were established in Bike Walk OKC. So we have our pedestrian priority areas, 6 projects. I wanted to show the number of streets that we're working on too, because these are a collection of sub-projects basically. And so while the center column makes it look like we're doing less than 20 projects, really we're hitting dozens and dozens of streets with sidewalks, and that was in our first approval. And so, just looking at this list, we have several projects in each of these categories, and access to schools, parks, access to public transit. And within downtown, we've got that just as one project. We have yet to determine exactly where we're going to do those projects, so we're meeting with stakeholders such as Downtown Oklahoma City Incorporated and other groups to figure out where the best way to spend those dollars is. In a lot of cases, sidewalks already exist, and it's more important to do some repairs to address some of those ADA concerns. And with regard to that, I'm just going to go back to our team. Both James and myself are on the ADA Compliance Committee and are both have been trained and have certification that has to be renewed every 3 years. I have a personal I care specifically about those with visual disabilities. My father worked at the Georgia Academy for the Blind, and so that's something that's especially important to me, to make sure that these facilities are coherent even for those with visual disabilities. So this map shows the approved projects, where they are around the city, and the legend shows you the different project types. And all of these are in our preliminary scoping. Aubrey talked about the different approaches, the different procedures. There's the in-house or on-call contracts that can help us save a bunch of time and a bunch of money. And particularly with sidewalks, we want to really stretch these dollars as far as we can go, make sure that we're putting in as many sidewalks as possible. So that's the stage that we're in right now. The project team is going out, evaluating the project lists, and determining which ones are going to need special attention with regard to right-of-way acquisition or utilities or significant surveying operations. And we will be coming back to you with, sort of that divide. What projects do we actually need to put out for an outside consultant to come in and do some engineering and design? For those that we don't have to do that, that's great, and that'll help us stretch our budgets even further. Any questions on the sidewalks? Okay, we'll move on to the bicycle facilities then. And it's a very similar process. James and I will be the staff members working on that, and we're actually working with a different firm for this, Atkins, and we're partnering with Josh Malwick. He's a professional engineer with Atkins, and we've recently had a long get-to-know-you type meeting with Atkins and sort of established what our processes are going to be. And laid out what our goals are for our bike projects. And so these projects are laid out in the bike ped plan and in our project lists, and we've been internally in planning gathering a lot of information to figure out how best to roll these projects out. So a lot of these projects are on streets where the road surface may not be up to par. We don't want to put a bike lane on a street where the road surface makes it impossible to ride your bike. So we are looking at all the overlaps with projects from either the 2007 bond, the 2017 bond, or this program as well, where we can have these projects come in together, and our bike project may end up being just a restriping, which that road that gets resurfaced would need to be restriped anyways. So that would help us do these projects much more affordably. For projects where there's a resurface need, where there isn't an existing project, that's something that we're looking at and how we may have to modify our budgets to accommodate that. So this map shows the list of projects across the city, and we've begun thinking about them in terms of feasibility, which projects are likely to be the easiest to complete, and we want to start with those. We'd like to gain some momentum and some, basically hone our craft. This is something we don't have a lot of. We don't have a lot of on-street bicycle facilities in Oklahoma City, particularly along long stretches of road. We've got some excellent facilities downtown. If you've seen the MAPS 3 streetcar route, there's some new bicycle facilities that have come alongside that with some excellent examples of how paint can be used to notify drivers and cyclists to conflict zones, so that the elements of safety in our designs are very important. And in facilities where we do not have room to put in a bike lane and it would be a shared road facility, we talked about traffic calming, that would apply here as well. The way I think about that is on those roads we want cars or we want drivers and cyclists to be able to both use that facility safely. So if there's a disparity between how fast cyclists and automobiles are going, that's not really accomplishing that goal. So traffic calming would help to bring that design speed down for automobiles so that it's safe for cyclists to use that facility. Additionally, we are working on developing some standards for bicycle facilities. That's something that was not laid out in the bike ped plan. It was really more about where facilities should be. We have excellent standards for our sidewalks and our trails. Our on-street facilities, we haven't developed those fully yet, and that's something we will hopefully be working with in-house and with our consultants to establish what the best practices are across the country. And I will say that this is a field that has been developing very rapidly over the last 10 years. What was best practice 10 years ago is not today. And so we want to make sure that we don't use a facility design that doesn't accomplish our goals for safety. So we will be looking at things like NACTO, so that's the National Association of City Transportation Officials. They've been producing documents such as the Urban Bikeway Design Guide that lay out some really good examples for how we could be doing our facility design. And I will say that certain guides lack specifics about how to handle bicycles in intersections, and that's something that I'm especially cognizant of, making sure that we're facilitating those movements for cyclists where those conflict zones are. So just putting paint isn't necessarily enough if it's not really facilitating safe left-hand turns or right-hand turns. Any questions on the bicycle facilities? Okay, we'll move on to our trails then, and this is split between existing trails and new trails. And so for the existing trail facilities, our team includes the MAPS department, the Parks department, and CEC again. And I don't believe any of them are here today, but this will be our team. Brandon's here? Brandon's here. So we have a representative from our Parks department, and they will be using their trail wayfinding plan for those existing projects that were wayfinding projects, and these are the list of those projects where they will be doing improvements both in signage and resurfacing. The first of which is the Burt Cooper Trail, which is the Lake Hefner trails surrounding on the south side. And then there will be projects on both the north and south side of the river, as well as projects out at Lake Overholser, connecting Lake Overholser to Lake Hefner on the Hefner Overholser Trail. On the northeast side, we'll be making improvements to the Katy Trail, as well as signage. And then on the south side, we'll be making improvements to the Lightning Creek corridor. And I'm going to pass it over to Brock Miner once again, and he's going to give you an update on the Burt Cooper Trail, and then I will hop up and fill in some details on the new trails.
Thank you, John. I'll jump in and kind of do a quick construction update on the Burt Cooper Trail. As you know, Burt Cooper Trail was one of the projects we kind of picked that trail to be an early start trail project, and so we got that approved and pushed through, and so construction has started. We have a sequencing map here. It actually has 6 phases, and we've worked diligently, the contractor and Public Works, with the Parks Department to verify and make sure that we coordinate, around all the events. Everything's going on these existing trails. There's lots of events that we have to coordinate with, and so we kind of come up with a phasing plan. That way we don't interrupt anything, and we keep the trail open as much as we possibly can. And so, the first phase of that project, the first part of the construction was to go in there and try to do all the crack sealing. You'll see a lot of longitudinal, I'll jump forward. You see a lot of the longitudinal cracks and even the transverse cracks. So those kind of cracks are just more weather cracking, and it kind of goes back to a lot of the stuff that we talked about earlier. We'll go in there and we'll seal those cracks, and anytime there's, a transverse crack that is, inch, 2 inches greater, we'll go ahead and tear all that out, do a full repair on that, and then bring that back up, and then we'll even put that geofabric membrane that I talked about and put that over there, and we'll try to keep those reflective crackings. So you see that they've started on that, and they have actually went through, out of the 6 phases, they have completed the first 4 phases, and the phases kind of go west to east. A lot of the stuff on the east side, around the restaurants and everything there on the lake, there's a lot of events that happen over there. So we were able to get started more, west going to east, down around on the trail. And so they have completed all the crack sealing all the way through phase 4. They're currently in phase 5 working on that. And they also went ahead and jumped back to phase 1, where the area that we discovered that really needs a full reconstruction. And this is area here. There's a lot of kind of elevation changes and bumps in that. So we thought that it'd probably be best to go ahead and reconstruct all that, just to make sure we get a good base. And here's an area where they've got it torn up. You can see that they've already put the aggregate base, and they're going to kind of bring that back up. So jump back to my phasing plan here. As they move through this, they should finish 5 and 6 with all the crack repairs in the next couple of months, and then they intend to get the full reconstruction done about the same time they finish with all the crack seal. and so hopefully we'll get that resurfaced as quick as possible, and hopefully we can have that done, in December, before January. They're making a lot of progress. A lot of this, of course, is weather pending, asphalt and even the crack sealant repair stuff. It's temperature sensitive on that stuff, and so we got to make sure we have good temperature days and the surface is at the right temperature. But if we can avoid a lot of moisture and get some good sunny days, then they'll be able to progress on that and hopefully, be done, January, February. Any questions on kind of the construction on that?
Brock, on that one area, the slide where you're reconstructing,
Yes.
which is on the west side of the roadway.
Yes.
Is that just south of Britton Road, I believe?
Yep, correct. Yep.
The thought has been that area got so waffled because of the tree roots from those. There's a line of cottonwood trees not very far to the west of the trail. You resurface it, how does it, if it is the tree roots that are creating that damage, how does that work toward the future?
One of the things we did in that area, we think that some of that was a cause of that. Those roots, as they kind of grow, they will, maybe not just be in the base, but right underneath the base. And as it moves and grows, it will push, any dirt or aggregate, and it will create that kind of stuff. And so what we did in the picture here, you see kind of a curb on that, and so we'll treat that as a barrier curb, a root barrier, and so to speak. And so that's kind of our way to keep that from happening again. Where we think that those are getting too far, we went down 18 inches in that area, and we put that, and so going that depth, as they navigate under, they should be far enough under that it won't push any of that base up, and so we should eliminate that problem going forward. So it was definitely part of the design and something that we thought of, and we should eliminate that issue moving forward.
We don't have trees that close to most of the trails. Some areas we do, so
Yep.
that's hopefully, you hate to go in and reconstruct and then have the 2 years just back to where it was.
Yeah, and I definitely don't know anything or a whole lot about all trees and stuff, but all trees have different root systems, and cottonwoods and stuff seem to, stay a little more shallow.
Yes. Can you go back to the photograph that shows the overview of the Burt Cooper Trail?
This one here?
No, sir, the map.
Oh,
shows.
yeah. The sequencing map?
Right. To my understanding, the work that's being done is basically the south half of the trail system. The north half of the trail system would be on the dam. A lot of that would be on the dam itself, which would fall under the Water Utility Trust. Correct?
I may have to reach out.
So, a lot of people run under the impression that the entire trail system and the entire circle of the Burt Cooper Trail was going to be repaired. But our monies are going into basically the south part, and the north part is under the jurisdiction of the Water Utility Trust. So the question is, how does that work to get that? Because if anyone's been out on these trails, the north part is as bad as the south part, and in some areas there's some really bad lateral cracks and cross cracks.
So everything that you see on the drawing in color here is one of the phases of the trail project. So it's the west, the south, and I would say a significant portion of the east. So everything that's in color is one of those phases. The north section, and what's used as a trail, is actually a lake access road. It's actually for lake maintenance, and so it's a road that's maintained by the Water Utilities Trust. I do know that the Water Utilities Trust director has been approached and that they're looking for possible improvements to that road, but it would be a project outside of Better Streets, but one that the trust could consider.
That basically will not be any of the stuff that we're dealing with. They have to make the decision to spend the money to do resurfacing or repair work.
So I mentioned, if we had pictures of that, it really is a road and not a trail. The pictures that I think that Brock just showed you are more trail-like in nature. It's ones that are really more specific to bicycles and runners and walkers. That north section, which goes across the dam, is vehicular rated. It would be more of a streets-based project as opposed to a trail-based project. So it's It's different, not that it's used differently. Yes, the trail riders do use that section, but it is outside of the scope of the project that we approved here.
Well, if you're going counterclockwise, there's a delineation where cyclists and trail users would be on the far outside, away from the lake.
So let us continue to work with the utilities director on that portion. As I mentioned, I know that there's still some conversations about the request, and it's not specific from the Better Streets Advisory Board, but there's definitely a lot of Lake Hefner Trail users that have made that same comment.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
All right, I'm going to continue through to the new trails portion. And again, this is a partnership between MAPS Planning. We're working with CEC Corporation, and we're also working with Happen Associates on one of the projects I'm going to describe. So we had 2 new trail projects approved, and this may actually address one of your concerns, Chairman McKnight. Number 1 being the Lake Hefner Trail connection. So there are trails at Bluff Creek that are north of the dam, north of the arterial street that flanks the north side of the lake. I'll get into that. And then the second is the Deep Fork Creek Trail, for which this committee funded a significant portion. Okay, so I think this slide got out of order. But basically to show the Deep Fork Creek Trail is the biggest gap in our trail network right now. So this is a project that's been under works for more than a decade. It's a very challenging alignment, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So actually, I'm going to talk first about the Lake Hefner Trail connection. So like Eric said, the road along the north side of the dam functions as kind of an extension of the trail. There's a bike lane on it. It's used for all different purposes: driving, cycling, running, fishing, all sorts of things. What we have, though, is the Bluff Creek Trail network to the north of the lake, which actually does connect around back to the dam road further east. And so this project is going to give us the opportunity to extend the trail network in a way that allows people to not have to use the dam road should they choose. So right now at Britton Road, the Burt Cooper trails terminate, and to the north of that we have an existing utilities gravel road. This is where you would transition to Lakeshore Drive and continue on around the lake. And here it is from the street view. It terminates right there. You can actually go west on Britton Road and get on a trail that gets you down to the intersection at Wilshire and Northwest Expressway, which is included in our bicycle project list as well. So our projects are all kind of fitting together nicely here. So the idea is that we would be able to connect this up to Hefner Road and take advantage of the existing full-stop intersection at Hefner Road and Ann Arbor Avenue to get you to that existing trail on the north side there. We're also looking, you'll see in this other red circle, at the ability to have this facility go up to Lakeshore Drive up here, so that if you were on this trail, you wouldn't have to go all the way down to Britton Road in order to get onto the dam road. Any questions about that before I jump into Deep Fork?
On that, John, presently that's just sort of a gravel road. And
Correct.
It will be then paved as a multi-use trail.
We are scoping that right now to determine the feasibility, but that is the intent. Yep. Okay, so the next one is the Deep Fork Creek Trail, and as I said, this has a long history. It's a very substantial project, the goal of which is to connect the northernmost point of the Katy Trail on the far east of this image to the southern tip of the Nichols Hills Trail, or the Nichols Hills city limit on the far west over here. And the North Grand Trail. Correct, yeah. And so the project that was funded through the Trails funding is this phase right here, phase 3. This is a 5-phase project. I'm going to go through the rest of these. Phase 4 is covered by this committee as well in the bicycle project list. The project Chartel to Deep Fork includes a connection from the existing bike lanes on Chartel to this project, and that would include a bridge across the river. And that's a way for people to get under I-44 without having to use Classen or Western, which are currently heavily trafficked with automobiles. If you've ever tried to ride across those, it can be very challenging. For our less experienced riders, it's really prohibitive in getting people across a major barrier. And that being one of our 4 primary goals of Bike Walk OKC is to make these barriers crossable. Phases 1 and 2 of the project are funded by the 2007 General Obligation Bond, as well as funding that we got through federal grants in the 2017 Transportation Alternatives Program. And then Phase 5, which is on street and is not necessary to make this connection right now, is something we're going to go after funding in the future for. This whole project is around $11 million, and through these 4 phases, we're funding about 90% of that, and are going to be able to connect the northeast side to the inner upper loop, as well as north of I-44. So this is just kind of a zoom in of what this project is funding. That'll get us under Lincoln Avenue, Lincoln Boulevard, excuse me, and alongside all of this residential and the office buildings. And this project has been is further along than our other new trail project because of the fact that we have funding from 2007. We've already made a lot of moves on this, working with Happen Associates, and they've done an excellent job defining where we can have trailheads, where we can have overlooks, where we're going to need bridges, and that's how we came to our cost estimates. And so this is a project that is being project managed with ODOT. So there's a lot of overlap, which is very beneficial because of all the proximity to the interstates and having to go over and under all sorts of different things that belong to them. And they are, I will say, they're extremely excited. This is a project they moved way up their list of grant-funded projects, and so this is a winning project all around. Here's some photos. So this is a view of it. As you can see, it's pretty overgrown right now, and it's very deep. This is Deep Fork Creek. The name fits it, and when it during heavy rain events, you'd be amazed how high the water line goes. So there's some significant challenges with regard to hydrology, and there's going to be a significant amount of trash cleanup because you can go out there right now and you can see how high the water goes. I mean, 30 feet higher than it runs normally. I mean, it's significant. So that's a major design challenge we'll be considering. Also, the alignment goes right by the interstate. We've actually gone out and done some site visits, and my initial concern was that the noise would be completely overpowering, but it really isn't, and I'm not entirely sure why. It could be all the vegetation, but it's actually just a great opportunity because of all that existing right-of-way plus the natural features in the area. And this is a photo under a bridge. You can see all these rocks, which may have been built up from flood events. This is clearly being used by other people for different purposes right now, and something that we will be addressing as well. And that's all I have. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
John, on that, and I agree with your earlier statement, this is a great missing link. If you think about the trail system we have in Oklahoma City being a big circle with spokes going in, this is a big missing part. And a lot of the funding was hopeful to come from the 2007 bond. Mm-hmm. So that money will be used for the first and second phase.
That's right.
And then the next phases, hopefully, and all this would happen at one time.
Absolutely.
Is what you're trying to coordinate.
That's correct. And yeah, it's a lot of moving parts, but we were able to use that bond money as matching funds for those federal dollars. So the foresight of getting that approved in 2007 is what allowed us to get here today.
That is great. Because this has been something that everyone has been waiting for.
Right.
A couple of years ago when we had a tornado come into Oklahoma City, a lot of people tried to find refuge in areas adjacent, and it became a huge rain event, and a number of people were washed into the Deep Fork and drowned. Mm-hmm. It holds so much water, and there's so much volume of water moving through there. Can there be a warning system? I don't think anyone would be out in a flood riding their bike, but...
Oh, I think those sort of special circumstances have to be considered in our design, and with our wayfinding signage, there can definitely be inclusion of that in those, whatever those fixtures or whatever those whatever the sign package has, those types of warnings. I mean, we have special notifications for special conditions on all our trails, and I think that that would be something that makes a lot of sense here. And, you know, as we get into engineering, those problems will become more and more apparent, I think.
Because that's a unique situation for our trail system, to have that potential danger. But since it's, on the signage, the wayfinding signage that we've talked about will go in as projects are reworked, like the Burt Cooper Trail. Is there funding to put signage up when this trail is built? It was my understanding that no funds were going to be spent until future maintenance.
Well, the Parks Department
Required
included
that.
that in their. Wait, you can come and talk.
Yes, the new trails will be included, the signage with those new trails. And so that way we don't have the same problems what we've had before, where we have the trails in without the signage. And so those are now kind of working hand in hand for new trail lanes that are put in.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Yes, sir.
So I had a couple of questions along the same lines of what Chairman McKnight was asking. So one is, and it looks like you guys have it there, but I know there's some pretty extensive work going in with at the intersection there at 235 or Broadway Extension I-44. So I guess so part of that coordination, I guess, is for this work to be able to take place as a lot of that work is also happening over the next 3 years.
I'm not sure of the time frame, and once we get into engineering, we'll really be able to figure out what the construction timeline is. But we've gotten our scoping well underway, so I would say that that's likely. I mean, this is going to be a very challenging trail project, whereas something like the Lake Draper Trail was very easy. Very few conflicts. This has significant conflicts, but I think the payoff is going to be, worth it.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely actually excited to see the whole thing come together because I think it has a lot of connectivity opportunity for several parts of the city, frankly, from where it sits. I mean, with the core to that near northwest side and obviously northeast side. So you're saying that you guys are not at the point of really having a good handle on the timeline itself then yet?
That's not, or we are not, but that's something I'd be happy to really kind of prioritize to get back to you on that.
Okay, that's something I'm probably the most curious about, given the work that's going into it. And then the last thing is just maybe to kind of go back on the question around the flooding and the design. And I do think you indicated you guys were at that conceptual point, but should there be, or is there some consideration taking place around, especially, I think there are several bridges, and obviously just in this section that we're talking about today, there are 2 or 3, I believe. So because of the flood, because of the the catchment sort of area, nature of Deep Fork, elevation-wise, so is that infrastructure, is this something that, I guess, question is there going to be maintenance concerns or considerations that come into play, for what you would expect to be, what you expect to flood, or would the elevation of the trail actually stay pretty significantly above the typical flood line?
As far as I know, that's our approach. When we were out in the field, that's what we were looking for. There are certain areas where it opens up really wide, and I don't think an 800-foot bridge is maybe as feasible as dealing with those maintenance issues. I don't know. There's some trade-offs that I think we're going to have to really look at when we get into the engineering, and these are questions I have myself.
Okay, so it sounds like this is the gist of what you're planning to do. Probably more information to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Well, this is exciting.
Very much.
That is a very difficult area to accomplish, but it is so needed, and it will be a very beautiful trail.
I agree. All right.
Thank you, John. Let's see, next would be financial reports. Good morning.
Good morning. Craig Freeman with the city's finance department. Just give you a quick update on our financial overview or financial summary. We received $9.5 million in sales tax in October. That was $337,000 ahead of target. If you look at the year-to-date on the far right-hand side, it's $77.5 million has been received so far. That's about $3.5 million ahead of target. When you roll in the interest, In total, we're about $3.9 million ahead of target so far, so really good news. You look down the bottom section on expenditures, there's $58 million that has been allocated to projects that have been approved. A total of $28.8 million has been encumbered, $1.3 million has been expended in October, with a total of $5.5 million expended to date. And I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Next item is number 5, other business.
You're good, just about
Okay. Next would be director's report.
Oh, we have.
I think, yeah, I was going to say, I think, Auburn, I think.
I'm sorry, we need to back up just a second. On the financial report, we need to vote to receive that.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you, Board.
If we move back just to director's reports, we just have a couple of updates as we move forward. I think one of the things that we had spoken about in some of the earlier presentations is we engage consultants. We're still reaching out to you as a board for participation on those. So as we go through the selection process, we are going to want to actually physically identify up to 2 board members for each selection process. You'll actually be mailed packets of information for your review. It'll have instructions. It'll give you a receipt date that we take that information back. The general process is this, is that when we advertise for a project, it notifies consultants of a project being available, and they'll submit letters of interest that also come with some RFP-type information. We'll assemble all those. We can get sometimes as many as 20 or 30 different proposals, and we're having to shortlist those to sometimes 4 to 8 for interview. We simply just don't have the time to interview all 30. So this would be a part of the process that you'd be able to make some recommendations on who you'd like to see interviewed, and then to also have you participate in the interviews as well. So that's coming up very quickly here in just the next few short weeks. So we'll be reaching out to the chairman and trying to secure the individuals that would like to participate in that process. I think the other item that I mentioned earlier is that we're going to bring back to you the final street prioritization and the new street list reconsideration. We have authorized a number of street projects. We're not at this point fearing that we're going to fall behind and need a list very soon, but as we get that list published, we would like to start considering that next authorization so that as we go into the spring, we continue to have those projects on the ready and the ability to have them contracted and ready to go, and that we're not waiting on bidding and some other opportunities. And I think the last item that I might update today from a public works perspective and planning, and it's really a citywide, if you go to okc.gov, Better Safer, I think we've announced that before, that is where we really house all of the information about the Better Streets, Safer City initiative. One of the things that Mayor Holt was very helpful in making an update is that we now have a full project list that accompanies also the project map. So for those, there was a number of requests for a list-based version. You'll find that it's a lot of pages, there's a lot of projects, but there's also a companion map that is there that you can zoom in and you can look at those areas as well. So if you're getting questions as board members, you're needing that resource to point somebody to, make sure they go to okc.gov, Better Safer, and they can find that information there. The implementation plan is also housed there, so you can actually see those project budgets and those approvals that have been completed to date.
Thank you, Eric.
I might just add on to that I've received a couple of questions from citizens that are following this process, and as we've approved those long lists of projects, and we've had certain projects move forward to City Council for approval, it's only those projects that have been approved by City Council that will show up on the website. So anything previously that had been determined to be on a list for future funding isn't going to be updated until it has been approved. So if you have any questions about, I thought our street enhancement project had been funded by the sales tax program, you might say that would be in a future round of approvals. And to that end, I wanted to let you know that we still receive requests for things like sidewalks to be installed across Oklahoma City. And as we mentioned in the very beginning of this process, since we are approving projects in batches moving forward, it allows us some flexibility to consider projects that might come forward that we maybe had missed. So as we receive requests through either City Council or the Mayor's Office or directly from citizens, what we're doing is looking them up and typically go to the website because it's the best source for city staff as well. City staff can look them up to see if they've previously been funded either through a previous GO bond or Better Street, Safer City program. So we let citizens know the status of funding. If it does not have a current funding status, then we add it into the database that we've been using to compile all the projects across Oklahoma City indicating need. And then we will use the criteria that we have established to rank and score those projects. So with the next round of sidewalk projects that move forward, what we'll do is generate a new list so that it can incorporate any project requests that have come in to date. If those project requests score higher than the first batch line, then they would be included at the top of the priority list for the next batch coming forward, or if they fall somewhere within that range of projects that we looked at for the funding that we have available to be spent, then those projects might be eligible for Better Street, Safer City sales tax projects. But of course, Public Works Department always looks for ways that project needs can be addressed throughout the city. They're very proactive with those types of things if we get a concern that comes in from somebody about a safety need. So we still continue to try to work on solutions or looking at other projects that might have been funded with a street resurfacing project to look at ways to fill the gaps in the network. And I wanted to let you know if there are any citizens in your wards that come to you with questions about funding status to first let them know that the website will be updated over time, and then you can also send us those inquiries, and we'd be happy to look into it and get back with you.
I did have a question. I may have misunderstood your statement at the beginning. So those items that we've already recommended, there may still be stuff that hasn't gone to the council? Did you state that?
Most of our projects, we went ahead and forwarded about half of the funds to move forward with those projects. We still have about half of the funds remaining in almost every category to go ahead and appropriate. So we're trying to approve them as funds come in with the sales tax dollars. So we still have quite a few projects left to approve.
Yeah, but I think there might be a translation thing there. So the items that we've recommended so far, there's still some items that haven't been moved forward to the council?
Yes.
Okay.
For all of our categories that we looked at, going about halfway down that list, that first half of projects in most of our categories have been forwarded to council for approval. That second batch has not yet moved forward. So in the next 6 months or so, maybe even sooner for some projects, like resurfacing projects might come forward sooner. But we'll bring those forward in the next round of projects on that prioritized list. Okay.
Next item would be comments from the board. Well, I think we have been meeting now for about a year. We started meeting, I think, about a year ago, in October, I believe, of last year. So, I'm sorry. Well, time goes fast. I knew it was cold, but we have come a long way. We've learned certainly a lot. We're still obviously in a learning curve as all this gets done, but going around Oklahoma City, you certainly see a lot of signs that say Better Street, Safer City. And I think I'm getting a lot of comments back from citizens appreciating what's being done, appreciate the tremendous amount of work that goes into this from all of you sitting here, and greatly appreciate the board being involved in moving this forward. Question, I know there's been a lot of talk about MAPS 4. Will the term Better Street, Safer City continue in the future, or once we're done with our situation, that's going away? As far.
Sure. That's our understanding, is that Better Street, Safer City was a way to recognize all of the investments that the GEO bond and this specific sales tax focus would be made on, is the complete street model of street resurfacings and enhancements and the bike facilities and the sidewalks. There was such an emphasis through our continued citizen surveys on the condition of our streets in Oklahoma City, and also the desire for people to have more opportunities for getting around through different methods, walking and bicycling, that this last package of bond projects and sales tax has really been focused on that. So that really is a brand for what we're going through this time. I assume that whatever happens with MAPS 4 would take on its own type of branding based on what it is that the community wants to see happen next in Oklahoma City.
Any other comments from board? Next, any comments from staff? You guys are talked out. Any comments from citizens? Greatly appreciate everyone's efforts, and be safe. We are adjourned.